Hey there, I'm Justin Baldoni. I just talked to Kara, and I hope you tune in because I open up, she opens up, talk about a lot of stuff. And we don't really talk about fame, but we talk about what it means to be real. Not really famous, but just real.
You're listening to Really Famous with Gara Mayer Robinson. Rated PG-13.
So excited to share this talk with you. It's Justin Baldoni, the actor, director, producer, and now author. For those of you who love Jane the Virgin as much as I do, this is big. Justin, of course, played Rafael Solano, Jane's #1 love interest. Or maybe #2, depends on which team you're on. Anyway, Justin is an emotional and sensitive guy in real life, and we get into all that, just like he said in the teaser. And if you didn't watch Jane the Virgin, all good. It's not all about that show, and it's a really good talk. It's the kind of talk that I think is the reason you listen to Really Famous in the first place. It's deeply personal and analytical, and we laugh too. If you do love Jane the Virgin and you're new to the show, you may have missed my 2 conversations with Jaime Camille right here on Really Famous. Jaime, of course, played Rogelio de la Vega. I put links to both episodes with Jaime in today's show notes. And I also had a chat with the Latin lover narrator. His name is Anthony Mendez, and I put a link to my talk with Anthony in the show notes as well. You will also find a bunch of goodies right now on my Amazon storefront, like Justin's new book, Man Enough, which we talk about, Jane Villanueva's novel, Snow Falling, and the films Justin made, like Clouds and 5 Feet Apart, and a whole lot more. And remember, every time you make a purchase on Amazon using my link, you're supporting Really Famous, because Amazon gives us a small advertising fee each time you buy something. So please do visit Amazon using my link, amazon.com/shop/reallyfamous. And there's a link in today's show notes. So Justin has a brand new book called Man Enough that's just coming out now. It was inspired by a TED Talk that basically blew up, and a conversation series Justin has been doing where he takes a deep dive into what masculinity means, how it shapes not only boys and men, but all of us. And it's fascinating. In the book, he shares very personal examples and stories about what he's gone through and how he feels about it all. It's very revealing and insightful, so you'll probably want to pick up a copy. I put a link in the show notes. And the last thing about Justin that I wanted to share is this. I have interviewed a lot of people, as you know, a lot of celebrities, and sometimes when an actor, let's say, has a book or a project to promote, and maybe they're on a book tour or media tour or something, especially if it's in the area of personal growth, they can get a little extra focused on conveying that message or teaching whatever it is that they want to impart on the world. And sometimes it can be a challenge for me to break through that message and really get to know the real person, which, if you know me at all, you know is really my ultimate goal. But that was not the case with Justin. You will probably notice he's fully present and in this talk with me. And I have a feeling you're probably wondering to yourself, well, who is she thinking about who was hard to break through to? I'll take your guesses. If you want to email me, go right ahead. Just send an email to reallyfamouspodcast@gmail.com. I would love to see who you think I'm thinking of. Or thoughts on anything else. I'm always happy to hear your thoughts on the show or life in general. Don't forget, you can catch me and Justin and other celebrities on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/reallyfamous. I drop new videos now about twice a week, and I'd really love to see you join me there. I'd love it. If you subscribe, let me know. Say hi, drop a comment. Actually, that's probably one of the best places to go if you have thoughts on my interviews. I read all the comments and I respond. Again, it's at youtube.com/reallyfamous. And finally, if you're thinking about therapy, but you're not sure where to find a therapist, or if therapy is right for you, or if you really even want to commit to therapy, or how to even get started, give our sponsor a try. It's BetterHelp, an online therapy platform that's safe, affordable, and easy to get started. You'll be matched with a therapist in a day or two. Plus, you can change therapists if that's what you feel like doing. You know I'm a therapist. You know I'm pro-therapy, as is Justin Baldoni. You'll see, we talk about that. And you can get 10% off your first month by using the link in the show notes or going to betterhelp.com/reallyfamous and using the promo code ReallyFamous. And here now is Justin Baldoni.
I'm trying to connect my AirPods. Okay, can you hear me?
I do hear you.
All right, these AirPods are working. Let's see how long they last.
I hear you.
These are 100%, but these are my wife's.
Oh.
So I can't find my AirPod Pros. So we'll see how they go.
You lost them?
They're in my car somewhere. I don't know. I have kids and I have to dig through my car to find everything at this point. Yeah, you say 100%. So they should be able to last an hour. Let's see how it goes.
I feel like they're going to last. I feel good about it. Let's just go with it. And then if they stop lasting, then we just switch to regular.
Your mic sounds great. I got to get one. Because we're doing the Man Enough podcast right now, and all of our mics and all of our gear is at the office where we're shooting. So I got to get one of yours.
So yeah, I mean, I had to do it because once the pandemic was like, obviously it was going to stick. So I'm like, I can't just not. Normally I do it in person, right? So I'm in New York. I'm interviewing people either in a studio or I'm doing it. I go to their apartment or their house or whatever. Mm-hmm. I love that and I miss it. And I resisted for a few weeks, but I was like, forget it. I have to just do it. So I got myself a little setup. Not to say this isn't like my 8th setup so far. Believe me, I've tried every room. Oh. I have 3 kids, a husband, and a dog. So at some point I was in the middle of the house and just doing it in the dining room. And that was actually how I did a lot of them. But I finally retreated to a separate room. So here we are.
Hey, you got to do whatever works. I mean, you're a parent.
Yes, I am a parent, as you are. So, all right, let's get to talking. So I read your book.
Oh, wow. So I'm assuming you got the early galley copy?
I did. Read it on my phone, got a PDF, read it on my phone.
Read it on your phone?
Yes. But that was fine because I could read it anywhere. I could read it in bed and not need a light. It's
I wish
good.
You would have had I'm so sorry you didn't have the book in your hand. I haven't even seen the book in my, like the book that I have. I'm going to spoiler alert. It's like just the cover. And I opened it up.
Yeah.
And because, we have to do social media and tell people about it. And it was so funny. I cried when I saw it. I posted it, but then I opened it up obviously afterwards and it wasn't my book. It was somebody else's book. And I was like, oh, this is ironic. This is fitting. It just came and my wife was filming and it was a big moment. And I was like, my book, I thought it was one of the early copies that press would get. And, it was somebody else's book with my cover on it. So, and I was like, guys, why are we sending? Because I hadn't even, and it was so early. There was so much. I've changed so much since the copy that you probably got. And I was like, why are we sending it to people? It's not done. They're like, we have to. I'm like, okay, well, fingers crossed.
I have to tell you, it made my job. Well, you just personally, I think, are making my job easier because normally this show is all about getting to the real person, really getting a feel for who you are and what you think about different things and not just the same old polished image that everybody sees, not like, oh, celebrity, but really the human being. I'm all about the human being. So
got it.
Reading
so
your
really
book,
famous is it's a play on words. It's like, who are you really? Right. Is that what it is for you?
Okay. You're the first person who actually, before I explained it, said it. You're exactly right.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. It's who are you really? Right. It's like, well, I mean, that's what Man Enough is. Man Enough is like a reclaiming of that phrase.
That's exactly
But anyways,
right.
You were saying, okay, so we're going to get down to who am I really? But you were going to say, tell me, what did you think of
the rough copy of the book that you read.
Great. I mean, I don't want to use the word great. It's so, like, I don't like that word anymore. I've kind of tried to remove it from my vocabulary. But I really liked it because you were you. I don't know you in real life, but I felt like you were being you and presenting yourself in real life. And I felt as though you did a great job. Obviously, writing is not easy. Obviously, sharing your innermost insecurities. I kind of felt like you had taken all your insecurities, right? And you decided, I'm just going to expose them all and share them with everybody, which I can't imagine how hard that would be. So I think you nailed that, and you're very relatable.
I nailed sharing all my insecurities. Well, it wasn't even all of them. So it was only a portion of them. So that just goes to show you.
Book 2.
Yeah, nobody wants to read that, though. Nobody wants to read the book 2 of the insecurities. Book 2 is going to be what I learned from book 1. But
it was interesting, too, how you said at one point that Emily said, this is really good, but you need to read your own book.
Yeah, I think that was you clearly made it through the end of the book because that was at the end of the book. Yeah. And it's true. We write, I don't believe in what I think I said it somewhere in the book is like, you might write a book, but it doesn't make you an expert at everything. It doesn't mean that you're perfect at implementing the very things that you're writing about. I often joke that I wrote a book called Man Enough, yet don't feel man enough to have written it. And that's kind of the great irony that is everything that we're doing. But yeah, so my wife read it and she's like, this is really, really good, but baby, you need to read your own book. And it's true because I got to remind myself. And what she was really getting at was, the reminder that I am who I am is enough. And she, she's always telling me to be nice to her husband.
Yeah.
So, she's a badass. Was there a part, I'm going to interview you. Was there a part of the book that really touched you, that really made you think or made you said you were married?
Yeah.
Made you look at the man in your life or men in your life differently?
Totally. And I'll tell you one other level that I have to this is that I'm a therapist as well. So I'm not a practicing therapist anymore, but that's my background. I hope it doesn't close you up or, shut you down right now. I don't think it will.
I go to therapy. I go to therapy multiple times a week.
I love that. Yeah. We can talk about that too. So
Sure.
You wanted to know which parts touched me. So I think what I thought of most was less about my husband and more about my sons growing up. So I have one daughter and 2 sons. And so that, I think a lot of what you were talking about, especially at the beginning when you got right into what the culture tells you, what the other boys tell you, you need to say, do, or act to be a boy, to be a man, to have balls, that it's interesting that to be a man, you have to be the opposite of a woman, which growing up would be a girl and a boy, obviously. So that was very interesting from the get-go. So you got me right from the start, I think, when you started to talk about that. And while I think that a lot of that is true, I don't think I realized on that level what boys have to deal with and how that, the societal norms impact everybody. So I'll pick that as my first thing, my main thing.
Awesome.
What do you think?
I'm very happy because as I imagine as a mom, you don't really, you send your kid to school, but you don't realize what he's learning at school, and the social forces that he's up against. And so, hopefully what it does is it gives people some compassion for what boys have to go through and doesn't justify or give anyone a free pass, but it does show how hard it is for us to go against those forces. Mm-hmm. And the need to ask ourselves questions and to start to understand what those forces are so that we can then start to overpower them ourselves.
Yeah, and there's that interesting cycle too of the abused sort of becomes the abuser, like you practice what happened to you on other people. Yeah.
That's masculinity, right? I often, I talk about, there's a part of the book where I talk about how one day I could be, being tied to a goalpost by the upperclassmen, on the soccer team. And then the next day I would score a winning goal and then I would be tying someone else to the goalpost. And that goalpost is masculinity. That's what it is. It's this thing that, as boys and as men, you grow up and you want to be accepted by the other boys. You want to be liked. You want to be considered cool. And then, you get tied to the goalpost or bullied and picked on. And then you find somebody who has a lower standing than you or smaller than you or something than you, then you can put down to build yourself up. Right. Yeah. So all we're doing is just perpetuating the cycle of abuse and bullying and harm. And it's got to stop at some point,
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it was so interesting too. I just lost my train of thought for a second, but it was something that you said about, okay, this is it. So you were a sensitive and emotional boy growing up, like from the get-go. This is, by the way, really like the instant that I really felt like, okay, this is so interesting to see this perspective, because my son, my youngest son especially, is like that. Like he's emotional and sensitive to other people's feelings. Not sensitive in the you said this, we kind of use the word sensitive incorrectly, right? Do you remember writing that? Well, of course you remember writing everything.
Yeah, of course.
50 times over, I'm sure.
It's a displaying, right? It's like, it's a positive. The way it's described in the dictionary is like, it's a positive thing. It's a trait that all of us should aspire to, yet we use it as a negative thing.
Right. And like to associate that with like boys aren't supposed to be like that. That is so wrong, right? The more sensitive we all are, the better off we all are. So that's so interesting. So from the get-go, you were like, this is not acceptable. I can't be sensitive and have emotions, which, is such a mistake, but it makes sense that boys grow up with this. And I guess girls grow up with it too, assuming that that's the case, how they're supposed to view it.
Yeah. Well, Bell Hooks talks about it, and I read about it in the book. Bell Hooks talks about the psychic act of mutilation that all boys have to kind of wage on themselves, right? It's a war against our own feelings, our own sensitivity. In order to be accepted, we have to mutilate psychically those parts of ourselves, almost make them not exist so that we can appear to be strong and impermeable, which is the opposite of vulnerable. Vulnerable makes us weak, right? Vulnerable is the thing that makes us vulnerable to an attack by having or displaying, feelings or showing things that will make us just, vulnerable to then have those things used against us, which is an attack. So we have to cut those feelings off from ourselves so that we don't even know how we're feeling half the time. You ask us how we're feeling, we're like, good, good. Okay, fine, good. But how are we really feeling? Oh, no. You ever ask someone like a follow-up question to that? Like, no, but how are you really feeling? What's happening in your heart? We have no clue. Our brains go, I don't know. And that just right there is a problem. We just need to, and I have the problem. And I wrote the damn book. Half the time, I don't know how I'm feeling. I have to actually check in. My wife says, how are you? And I'm like, good. I'm like, oh shit, I'm doing it to myself. I'm like, okay, how am I feeling? And then I go to therapy and it's like, how are you actually feeling? What's the feeling behind that? And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm feeling. Holy shit, I'm stuck in it. I'm stuck in the hamster wheel too. Just because you write a book on it or you're aware of it doesn't mean that you're not affected by the same things.
Right. So what are you working on in therapy? Is it a lot of the stuff that you talk about in the book, or are there other things?
Right now, well, what I'm working on, ironically, in therapy is actually tapping into how I feel about things. Like, what am I feeling? Like, I'm pretty good at saying what I'm feeling, but what am I actually feeling? How do I feel about that? Because still, it doesn't matter if I'm able to feel. I have 37 years of repression, of repressing feelings for my own protection, that it doesn't just get undone over a day or a week or a year or 2 years. It's like checking in with myself. So it's like I might be angry about something, but then all we know, and you're a therapist, all anger is unexpressed pain, right? And sadness. So it's like, well, what am I actually hurt by or sad about? Where's that come from? And until we actually get a chance to really know what those things are, you're just stuck.
Right. So you use that why questioning. You ask yourself, well, why
The
do
why
I feel
ladder.
this way? Yeah, the why ladder.
Yeah.
And I've heard of people using that before, and I think that's good. And maybe in a way, women are a little bit better at figuring out the why or the feeling.
Well, you said it. I mean, you said it, not me, but yes, absolutely.
I said it. And I'm a woman. And, again, it doesn't mean that men aren't able to or shouldn't be or can't. Well, that's the same thing. But it's just that you've been trained not to. Like what? You wipe those emotions, put those emotions on the side, right?
What you're describing, and just for anyone who's listening, what you're describing is in the book, I talk about the why ladder, which is asking why multiple times to get to the root core of why you are doing something, what you are actually feeling, what's motivating you. And I think I talk about it specifically in the body image chapter, like around working out or what is it like? And that was just the right place to put it because the book was just getting too long and I didn't know where else to put it. But, it's like, why do I want to work out? What is it? Is it because I'm feeling insecure because I'm been staring at Instagram for an hour and all I see is these like aspirational, like super fit people and I feel bad about myself. So is that coming from a place of lack? Or do I want to work out because like, I just want to feel good? Do I want to work out because I get energy when I work out and my blood is pumping and like, it causes it causes like a dopamine hit or my hormones, whatever it is, what's the why? Or is it just because like, man, I am not flexible right now and I want to be flexible so that I can run around with my kids and not pull my hamstring? Any reason is good so long as you know the answer. But so often we like just go and we do something and we don't even know why we're doing it. And so the idea is to start to train yourself to understand the actual motivations for why. And generally you can get to the root with 2 whys, if not 3. So right now, as an example, I'm a Baha'i in the Baha'i faith right now, from sunrise to sunset for 19 days, we're fasting. It's called the Baha'i fast. And what's funny is you don't realize how often you walk to that fridge, you open it, and you're not even hungry, or you just want something. Right. And so now I'm fasting. I'm between sunrise and sunset. I'm not eating or drinking. Mm-hmm. I get to ask myself, why? Well, shit. Oh, I'm hungry. Am I? I'm actually not hungry. I feel fine. Why do I want to go eat? What's underneath that? Or like, why do I feel like I need to drink coffee? And then what's under that? Or like, I have energy. Why do I need a coffee? What part of me is pulling me to coffee right now? What is that actually doing for me or covering up? Do I feel like I need more energy? Am I and that's the thing is like, I don't want to, and I don't want people to get into like this spiral of asking themselves why so much that they become paralyzed. It's a very quick, simple thing. It might seem like it takes a long time, but it's very simple. It's just checking in with yourself. It's the basis of mindfulness and meditation. It's checking in with your body. How am I feeling? Why did I interrupt my wife? Was I listening to her? Why am I, and it's just asking those questions.
What do you make of this? I tend to be an interrupter.
Again, it's not just a male or masculine or feminine thing. I mean, it's also a personality thing. Also, look, and I'm, again, I can't speak for you, but I do know women that have had to interrupt their entire lives in order to get men to listen to them, to be forceful, to be dominant.
Right.
I don't, like, again, it's like you have to look at the whole playing field and wonder, again, it's a trait. It's not just like every man's an interrupter. It's just that we're taught to be interrupters, right? Also, there's family dynamics and there's a whole thing. I don't know if you come from a Jewish background or what your background is or an Italian background, but, that's also a way of communicating,
right.
In the Jewish tradition, right? It's a way of engaging in conversation and making somebody feel seen or heard. By interrupting somebody, you're engaging in a conversation and letting them know that you're actually active and not bored. Right. So it's cultural. It's also cultural for some people. And especially, there's a lot of Jewish women specifically that have that cultural trait that are looked at, though. Keep in mind, this is where and I don't know if you've had this experience. I'm curious if you had. As a man, it's normal. As a man, it's completely normal for me to interrupt. Nobody says anything. Most women just expect it. Luckily, I have women in my life who mirror and show me, but with women. But I'm curious, and I want to know, as an interrupter, how do people respond to you?
Well, see,
how do men respond to you?
Interesting. So a couple of interesting things that you said. So number one, I was going to say before you actually said it, the cultural element, that it's a family thing. It is family. I inherited this, no question, from my dad, probably more than anybody else, and his parents and everybody else. So that's part of it. But the dichotomy is I'm also a listener. Like as an interviewer, as a therapist, that's one of my strengths, is to really hear people and really listen to what they're saying. Let them talk, the whole thing. So it does sometimes surprise me that I'm both.
Is your brain like, what am I listening, interrupting? What am I supposed to do? Do you have does your brain kind of explode sometimes? How do you balance when you're going to interrupt, when you're going to listen?
I think it's what you said. I think it's when it's a moment when I'm like showing that I'm in that conversation with you, or that I'm with you. I think that's maybe the common thread, is that I'm listening and I'm with you and I'm really feeling and hearing what you're saying. And then at the same time, when I do interrupt, it is that, hey, we're together, we're connected on this. So it is funny. It's sort of a different dynamic, a different type of interrupting, I guess, than you're talking about that normally happens, that women experience normally from men. Different, a little different.
Yeah. And the interrupting I'm talking about isn't cultural. It's my wife and I in a conversation or in an argument, and I interrupt, and what that does is it's belittling what she's saying, and I'm saying I'm right. It's saying, yeah, but, or right? It's a different type of interruption. The cultural interruption that you're talking about is very much a yes and, right? I think the interruption that a lot of women experience with men is a no, but.
You're good. You're like a therapist in training over here. It's like you've studied human behavior and cultural behavior too. I
have no idea. I just observe. I'm not, but
you're sensitive. That's your sensitivity showing itself.
You have to be. I think all of us are sensitive. I mean, in the book I talk about how even men are far more sensitive than they realize. Men actually were prone to be more sensitive than women at first. In this one study, I talk about how men were shown something and then they reacted quicker than women emotionally. Yeah. But once they knew they were going to be shown that thing again, they were slower than women. So what that shows is that men are just as, if not more, sensitive than women are, but we train ourselves not to be.
Right. You shut it down before it goes.
You shut it down. We've trained ourselves, and we are in control of our sensitivity because we have to be for survival. And so for me, I've always been very sensitive, and I've trained myself to not be. But then what happens is I get sick. My stomach gets upset. I get a knot in my stomach. My chest tightens, and I don't feel good about myself. And I know that, oh wow, I'm up against masculinity. I'm up against like my internal and external at that point. And that's not a fun place to be. So I'm learning to live and be grateful for my sensitivity and my empathy, right? I'm an innate empath in a lot of ways. My wife is a full empath. I'm like a 70% empath. And it's a very tricky thing because then you feel other people, which means like when you say something wrong, and by wrong, I mean when you say something that could be hurtful or insensitive, you can feel the other person react, and then you're very confused, right? So like in moments as a man, when I wanted to exercise my masculinity or my dominance, and I would hurt other people, I would live with two conflicting emotions: the power that I felt as a man exercising my dominance and feeling like a man, and also the conflict of feeling the other person's pain. And that is probably why I am doing what I'm doing with my platform today, because both that lives inside all of us. That lives inside me, the light and the dark, right? I have darkness in me. I have light in me, right? Part of the purpose of life and being human and religion and faith and all of this is to live in more of the lightness than the darkness.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the more that you analyze things, the more you get to that place.
So long as we don't get stuck in the analyzing, because that also can happen.
Okay.
It can be paralyzing. The analyzing can be paralyzing, right?
Tell me more about that.
I just think that we have to be careful because there's a lot of people that can overanalyze, right? And analyzing can stop you. It can give you paralysis. So I think it's just a balance. I think it's making sure you're analyzing. Like again, the why ladder can become the why trap. I don't write about this in the book, but that's just my experience. You can ask yourself why, and never be satisfied and then talk yourself out of something at the same time. So I just think there's a healthy balance, right? There's a healthy balance in analyzing and then also not letting that overtake and run your life. Because, it needs to be more automatic in some ways. Eventually it's, especially for men, I think it's going to be a little harder and you're going to come up against resistance because it's like, why? I don't know. Okay, go deeper. I'm sure you experienced this in therapy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I also know people that are overanalyzers who find themselves stuck because like they're overthinking everything and then they don't do anything. So again, everything is in moderation.
In moderation, totally. That's interesting too, because that is it's a different point, but it's just as important. And I think the more somebody has anxiety in life, and that's really, it comes with the territory. If somebody's a procrastinator, they're worried about things, they're looking for perfection, that can definitely become the cycle and not a healthy cycle. And it's like, it's one of those things where it keeps going no matter what you're doing. I think it's like, I always forget. It's a scientific law, and I always forget what it is. But things that are in motion stay in motion. What is that? Like kinetic energy or something like that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was going to say, is that Newton's theory of, I don't know.
I don't know what it is, but I always forget. I should just look it up once and for all so that I could actually say. This is the first time I'm talking about it on the show, but I do talk to people about it and how, you can get stuck there and then it's almost impossible or it feels impossible to start doing something about it, because you're stuck in that cycle. But then once you start, so action is really...
Newton's laws of motion.
Newton's law of motion. Yeah. Did you just look it up? Nice.
I just looked it up and I was like, and I said Newton's law and I stopped myself because I didn't want to be wrong. It's Newton's law of motion. An object at rest will stay at rest. An object in motion will stay in motion at a constant velocity unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. Yeah.
And it's not rest, right? So when you're worried or you're overanalyzing things, that's not rest either. That's motion as well, but it's a different type of motion. So it keeps going in motion. So that's
you said it. You said it best, which is it's the striving for perfection that creates anxiety, in that area. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to make sure people don't take from the book and the whys. Is like, it's not supposed to lead you to anxiety. Because it's not about perfection.
Yeah, I definitely don't think you're giving that message that's about perfection. Okay, I think you're good. You're good.
No, most of the books, like, I'm so far from perfect.
It's true. It's so interesting. Like, okay, so we've been talking about it for a while, but just like, and there's so much in it. So I want to give people an idea of what they're going to get when they read the book. So they're going to, number one, they're going to read about your insecurities, as I said earlier. And like,
do people even know? Did we say what the book was even about? I don't even know.
I don't think so. I feel like, can we do? So can you do that?
Yeah. So you just read it. No pressure. What's the book about? It's not about my insecurities.
I can't. No, it's not about your insecurities. But that was the thing that I wanted to say, to give you credit for, that you brought those up to the surface publicly, because I feel like you deserve a lot of credit for that. And I know you're going to be like, it's no big deal. I had to do
terrifying.
it.
It's not. It's totally a big deal. Thank you for saying that. It's awful. But there's no way to write the book unless I do it.
That's great.
Otherwise, it's hollow.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, what's the like clinical example? When you're going through medical school or whatever, like, and the only way you can write a book on masculinity from a personal perspective is by showing how masculinity affects you. Mm-hmm. But go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So the book, this is hard. I feel like this is really hard to put it into a little summary. And I'm sure there's a summary that is online that everybody can read, and it's right on the book. I'm
smiling right now. For anybody listening, I'm smiling right now. I'm seeing her on the spot trying to say what my book's about. Okay.
I'm going to say it. I'm going to just wing it and try to say it. So it's about undefining masculinity, but it's right. It's like the road to undefining it. For you, it was coming to grips with the fact that a lot of how society defines masculinity it's like a faulty narrative, but it's something that you grew up with. And so you go into what it means, how we understand masculinity, how it can be toxic. And again, I'm not saying toxic masculinity. I remember what you said about that. You don't like the term, and understandably. Nobody's saying all men are toxic or that masculinity is toxic, and you're not saying that either. But you have, this is going to be a long analysis, a long summary, but you have spent a lot of time reflecting on how it has impacted you, your relationships, women, society, and everything, basically. And so I know that you want people to understand or to look at it and reflect and think about how they do things and change it so that it can all be better and not everyone, it doesn't have to continue this way. Is that, how am I doing? I don't know. And
I think you did beautifully.
I didn't wrap it up though. So you're saying I'm not perfect. I'm still learning. A lot of people who I grew up with will be reading this now thinking, what are you talking about? This is not the you that I remember. Right?
Yeah, you remember that part. Yeah, great. That's true.
Again, I'm a listener. I do listen. I absorbed it. And so, but you're learning it's a work in progress. You're a work in progress and you're sharing it. How's that?
I mean, if you have a button that can do like a fake applause, I think you should do it now on your podcast. I think that was beautiful. And, yeah, that's really what it is.
So can I add a few little details because I think that people will want to know this. So
thank you for taking the time. Thank you for taking the time to read it. Most people, you know, we do these podcasts and they'll read like the cliff notes or whatever. I appreciate you reading the book. That's really sweet of you.
I wanted to, and you made it easy because it was very thought-provoking, I felt like. And even you had a section in there on racism too and everything that's been happening and how you were learning. And that was really good too. And what you did and the situations you reflected on about interactions you had with friends. So interesting.
Yeah.
So I encourage everybody to read, but I just want to add a couple little things. I wrote these down that I feel like should be mentioned when I talked about you deserve credit for sharing your insecurities. So some of them are body issues. So we don't have to go pull all of it apart. Everybody gets the gist of it now, I'm sure. And we want them to pick up a copy and read all of it, right?
Please.
So body issues. Are you smart enough? Oh, that's a big thing I could have used in my summary. Are you man enough? Are you this enough? Are you enough? That's a big theme for you. You spend a lot of your life wondering, am I enough of a father? Am I enough of a man? Am I enough of a...
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
That's it.
Okay. You admitted that Emily was not your wife now, was not attracted to you at first. Mm-hmm. That's a tough thing to admit. But the book is filled with these things. So let's just whet everybody's appetite. You're going to get all this stuff. You're going to read all this stuff and you're going to be like, yeah, this is the real person. And which is why when I knew I was going to be interviewing you, I thought this is so bizarre because he's already put so much out there that it's like my whole job is to help you open up and feel comfortable. And this isn't a gotcha kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but to get to know the real you.
Yeah, you're using your strengths as a therapist to talk to very closed off celebrities and get them to open up so people can feel who they really are.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So the book.
It's funny because when I looked at when at first they sent me the like really famous, I'm like, what is this? And then I was like, really famous? What is this actually? And I was like, oh, that's cool. I get it. I think I get it. Let's do it.
That's cool. Good to know.
Because really famous, I'm like, I'm not really famous. So it's like, well, you know, but I totally got what you were trying to do. I love it.
I love that feedback because I don't always get it. And I think part of what I like to do is I like to give feedback too, because people do need feedback in life to hear about what they don't know.
Because there's so many, there's so many versions of that aren't a play on words. So you're competing, you're up against a lot of like, you know, are you listening to people who are really famous? Like, are you trying to get to the really famous people and it's just about being famous? Like there's a lot of that celebrity. We're in celebrity obsessed culture. Right. So, but then I was like, and I looked at it and it was a second where I just was like, really famous. What is this? And then I saw what it was. I was like, I get it. I totally get it.
How interesting. So I maybe should put a little description under so that next time, or that people who aren't sure, it's totally the opposite of like the celebrity
put really in quotes.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. But would that make people feel like they want to be famous, but you're saying I'm not?
Or real, like, you know, do a play on it, right? So real, like, because the idea is you want to get to the real core of the person. That's all. But you're doing that anyways. But yeah, sure, a one-liner. I don't know. I'm not. You're doing great. You don't need my help.
Yeah.
And I'm not. And that's not feedback for you to do better. I was just like, yeah, it's like when people first hear man enough, they think the same thing. It's like that word has been used oppressively. So it's like, oh, screw that. Why are you using that word? I'm like, no, you don't get it. It's the same thing.
Yeah, but it's like, how would you, if you read Man Enough, if you just read that as a title, like, how would you think that that's so obvious what it looks like it would
this
be?
This is a couple years. Yeah, exactly. It was a couple years ago. But case in point, you're great. You don't need any help or anything. And it wasn't feedback to say anything was wrong, but I just remember that, like, that feeling.
Yeah. I appreciate that. That's good to know. So now another thing that you had me thinking about when I was reading your book was, so now looking back on Rafael, on the character, the whole fairy tale of it all. I mean, you said some interesting things about how you felt about your body when you were filming at different times. That was so interesting too. But like now in hindsight, what do you think about the whole, I mean, people love Jane the Virgin. I love Jane the Virgin. It's a great show. We loved it, right? And part of it was like, you know, looking at itself with a winking. Probably a lot.
Oh, yeah, the whole show was, exactly. Yeah.
And in fact, I had Jaime Camille on the show a couple of times. He was on.
Oh, did you? Did he open up?
Of course he opened up.
Did he open up?
He did. Why? Do you think he wouldn't?
No, I think you probably had to probe him a little bit, but he opened up.
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I had him on was a couple of years ago, probably. And I don't think it was that hard, but he talked a lot about his growing up and his mom and his dad and a lot of that stuff. And then the second time it was a little bit lighter. So it was like not a lot of...
He's a sweetheart.
Yeah, why do you think I had to have to poke?
Oh no, I just think that when people like Jaime, who are such larger than life personalities and are comedians, it's very easy to deflect with humor. That's all. So it's just because you're so funny. Like he's one of the funny, like I don't even know how someone can be that funny. You know? And so when you have that skill in your like knapsack, it's just very easy to pull out like a Swiss Army knife whenever you're like even a little bit uncomfortable. It's just like, oh, I know what to do with this. That's all. So that's what I meant is like, he's so funny.
You nailed it again. When you just said that, it reminded me of the first time I met him. So now I talk to him and we're like, you know, kind of friends, I guess a little bit, whatever you would call it. And I know his personality is great and he's not joking around all the time. But when you just said that, it did remind me of the first time he was on the show. And it definitely took me 10 to 15 minutes, I would say, for him not to be performing, I felt. I did feel like he was performing for me.
Yeah, well, but look, these guys, like, that's who he's a performer in his life. It's just, it might feel like he just is that. I've spent 5 years with the guy. He is so funny and so charming and so there with you. And like, you know, there's a whole thing and that's who he is. And so I think it might feel like he was performing. I think he probably was just showing up as himself, but the people that have his skill set, that are that brilliant, that are that funny, I think that it's just like, you know, they're in control of how deep they go when they want to go there. And they can give you a piece and then make you laugh, and give you a piece and make you. I don't have that skill. I'm just like, I'm not that funny, so I'm just going to go there with you.
You're just going to be honest and revealing, but yes, no, he is absolutely, that is a skill, and I think that's what people want from him too. They expect it from him, and they want it because it's delicious. Who doesn't love Rogelio? Right?
Oh no, everybody.
So everybody wants that. So I'm sure that he was used to that. But after that 10 to 15 minutes, then we did talk about the insecurities and his family and growing up and he being here and all of it, which was great. And now
he's really smart. He wanted to give your audience like a treat to stick around, and he's just smart. That's what he does. That's amazing. And he was helping your podcast by making them laugh and doing the whole thing, and then getting deep. The guy's a genius.
You're exactly right. And my most recent conversation with him was about building up Really Famous, right? Bringing it to a bigger audience. I asked him for advice and he was so great with advice. Like you're saying, he's so smart. He's like, okay, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, try this, let me put you in touch with this person. That's who he is.
He's so giving and loving. Yeah. I love him.
So
you were asking about Rafael.
Right. So you said in the book that probably when you allowed your sensitivity to come, you were became a little more comfortable in your own sensitivity, that Rafael seemed to have a greater sensitivity, the character, which is part of what makes him so well loved. I mean, I'll have to ask you this only because other people will want to hear it, but were you team Rafael or were you team Michael?
Well, for my ego, I was team Rafael. Because, as a man, as like the actor, you want your character to win, right? To win the girl. I think in life, I think it's tricky because I got to play this guy for 5 years. And so I understand, I know his insecurities and he's a good man, yet he's like me. Like he had, look at his father, he was adopted. He had his mother, it's like the whole thing was just everything, all the social forces against Rafael were so huge that it's a miracle that he ended up as good as he did. And really, if you look at why, it was because of cancer and ultimately because of Jane, because the women, right? So I got his journey. So as a person who was living in his shoes, I was team Rafael. As an outside observer, I would have been team Michael, because I want to reinforce the narrative that the good guy can get the girl, that the good guy can win, right? Now, he also messed up and got jealous and did a lot of bad things, and nobody, all of the heroes were flawed, which is why I think the show was so great. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it was who Jane decided she wanted for herself. So maybe that means I was team Jane. Well,
right. That's so interesting. So I'm going to defend Rafael because he wasn't a bad guy.
No, he wasn't a bad guy at all.
He just, maybe was not as in touch with himself as Justin Baldoni is becoming.
Of course not. And he didn't, because, he didn't have Emily Baldoni or Jane Gloriana Villanueva in his life until he did, right? His entire life was about earning his father's love. And that's and the only thing, and his father didn't really even love him because it wasn't even his dad. Mm-hmm. He found out later on, but his father only cared about success and money and hotels, and he was living in his father's shit. So of course he's going to be that way. Of course he's going to be the way that he was. So it's about, again, you walk a mile in his shoes and suddenly you understand everything.
Yeah.
You have compassion.
So true. So one of the things I think that's why I was bringing up Jaime as well, is because one of the things he told me was the reason why it worked so well is because everybody, all the characters were sincere, right? It could have looked silly or, over the top or whatever, but everyone was sincere. Like every character, you love every character. There was no character in there that you didn't, except for, it's been a couple of years. What was her name? The villain. Do you remember?
The villain? Magda? Rose?
Rose.
Yeah. Sin Rostro.
Right. That's right.
No, but you even liked her. Because, Bridget, who played her, was just so charming and so good. You like everybody. And that's what they tried to do. And that's what happens also when you, I think, have a women-led show.
Right.
Is you write three-dimensional characters and you have compassion and empathy for all of them, even the ones that are driving the story forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's so good to see that, because that there aren't that many complex women shown on TV, but here in Jane, there were so many. It was good for humanity to see all of that, I think. So
Ditto.
Is there going to be a sequel?
No.
Jane the Virgin?
No. No.
Just flat out no?
No, there's not. It was 5 years, 100 episodes, a beautiful experience. It was always going to be 4 to 5 years. That was the story arc of the show. I don't know. They might call us in a couple years or 10 years and say, hey, you want to do a reunion special, or, I don't know. Maybe the showrunner will come up with an idea for like a 6 episode or 5 episode. I don't know. But as of right now, no, it's it.
I might have some scoop, because this is another thing that Jaime told me in our last interview, was that Jenny was talking about she wanted to do some sort of a follow-up, not a whole sequel, but maybe like a 10 episode or something like that in the future. What's going on right now?
Oh, that's cool. I'd be down. All of us would do it.
We'd all watch it too.
All right. Well,
I hope we could do that.
Yeah. I haven't heard anything about it, but if it happens, if they call me one day, so long as I'm not off shooting a movie or, doing something, I'm in.
So speaking of which, okay, so was that, I think I looked at your IMDb page. Was that your last acting role? So you've only been directing and writing since then?
Yeah, it was 2 years. We wrapped the show. It'll be 2 years. So I've been directing and writing the book and building our studio.
Right. So fun fact also in your book is that your wife, Emily, auditioned for Petra, or was going to audition for Petra, the role of Petra.
She did audition for Petra.
That's so great.
Yeah. And I remember reading with her and being like instantly insecure about the way that Rafael was described and being like, oh my God, if she gets this, she's going to have to work with this guy. Like, who's this guy going to be? Like, he sounds dreamy. It's just, of course, that's the joke that life plays on you.
Right. But that is so interesting too. And you were kind of struggling. And I think you said you hadn't acted in 3 years when you got that role. So how did you even get that role?
Yeah, two years. Yeah. I was directing. I'd been directing a documentary series called My Last Days, where I was traveling the country and telling the stories of people that had terminal illness, but were living amazing lives. And I was directing music videos and commercials. That was, and with the goal of one day, maybe in my 40s, becoming a feature film director, right? I've been directing music videos since I was in my early 20s. So she had introduced me to her manager, who also represented directors. And we met, and I said, hey, this is what I want to do. This is the kind of stuff I'm directing. I'd love to do TV one day, movies, but for now I'm doing this kind of stuff. And they signed me. And then I said, hey, every once in a while, I'd love to audition as an actor because I miss it. It was a part of my brain that I missed. And like 2 weeks later, they sent me Jane the Virgin. And I was like, this looks familiar. I feel like I just read with my wife. It turns out they had been looking for Rafael for months and months. And they had screen tested a bunch of guys, and chemistry read with Gina, and Jenny, the showrunner, was just not satisfied because he was, he was the male heartbeat of the show. He was the male lead in terms of like the journey she had in her head for the character, which I wasn't aware of. I had no idea. It was a very bizarre thing. I went in, and like the next day they were like, come screen test. It's you. There was nobody else. Met with Gina. We read, we got along fabulously. We became like, BFFs, started talking about God and why we're here and all this stuff. Cause I hadn't acted. That was just a totally different wavelength. And that was it. Out of the audition room, they're like, congratulations. I was like, what? I've been acting for 10 years. And that's never happened. It's never been that simple. They're like, no, it's you. And I was like, oh, okay. We shot the pilot. Had no idea what it was going to be. Shooting a pilot is still like a lottery. You don't know if it's going to happen. Tons of pilots are shot. Got a phone call, got picked up, and then we were off. Next thing we know, we're at the Golden Globes. And just, 5 years later, the show ended. And we knew it was not canceled. We knew it was only a 5-year show. And how lucky we were to have all 5 years. So.
Yeah. I mean, that is so wild that sometimes it just happens. You think that's it, and then it's the biggest break, and then it changes everything. And that probably helped launch you into whatever else you really wanted to do on top of acting. Am I right? That kind of.
Well, yeah, because my goal wasn't acting. It was I had already started a production company when I was working the show. I was directing. I was producing these documentaries, and that was what I was going to do. I wanted to make socially conscious media. I wanted to make stuff that touched people's hearts and made people feel. And when this happened, I was like, okay, well, most of my time's now going to go to the show. But if I can be mindful, if this show can help me kind of get in the Hollywood elite, so to speak, or open doors for me that I couldn't get open, then let me use this show mindfully to build the things that I deeply care about that can help make the world a better place. And so every day I was on Jane the Virgin, I was doing 3 or 4 other things to make sure that when it ended, I'd be in a position to have the biggest impact. So Jane was the rocket fuel to the rocket that I had been building prior to Jane. So it was thought out in a lot of ways in terms of making sure that like, okay, great. So I'm on CBS and, 5 Feet Apart was a CBS film with Lionsgate, right? So everything had its place. And it took Jane the Virgin for anyone to take me seriously.
Right. Isn't that, yeah. It just reminded me of something else that you said in the book about how, when you were talking about body image and how you would feel, well, here's that word again, insecure sometimes when you were filming with your shirt off, right? Mm-hmm. And so you would share that a little bit on set. And of course, when you said, I'm starting to feel nervous or insecure about how I look, I have this scene coming up. And they would basically just laugh because what are you talking about? So that must be hard too. Like when you were writing the book, did you kind of think to yourself, like, did you worry about what are people are going to roll their eyes and be like, you have everything. What do you mean? Or is that a weird question? I'm not even sure what I'm thinking about when I ask you that. That really is interesting.
It was the best format to talk about it because nobody would interrupt me. Nobody would laugh at me. And it's just me writing. So, to have the able-bodied privilege I have and to have the body that I have that looks the way that it does kind of genetically, it puts me in a place in life where, because of also the social forces and how we're socialized, I'm not allowed to feel a certain way about my body except good. But that's not real. That's not fair. Right. And, I can only write about what I know. And my experience with my body is that even though it looks good, it doesn't always feel good, or that I don't feel good. When you're written into a show and in the script, it says we zoom in on Rafael's 6-pack. And yet I don't look in the mirror and feel like my 6-pack is good enough or defined enough for what the writer might have written. And that creates insecurity. I don't have anyone to share it with because society deems me to have a perfect body. So then what does that do? That just creates more shame and insecurity, and you feel like you can't talk to anybody about it. You're not allowed to. And in reality, there's a privilege that I have to have respect for. But at the same time, a lot of people that have really, really great bodies or who spend their time working out and fitness, deep down are covering up insecurity. They're masking something. They spend all day in the gym. Something else is going on, dude. Like, what are you not dealing with? And we lose ourselves in that. So you find something that you're getting external validation for, and then you put all your eggs in that basket. But what do we see? We see what happens when it becomes harder and harder. I'm 37 now. It's not as easy. 48, it's going to be twice as hard. 50, well, what do you see? You see men start taking performance enhancing supplements, testosterone, HGH, things that are not necessarily safe. You see, you risking your life to look a certain way so that you can not have to deal with the thing that you were masking anyways. Now, all I have to say, we're also validating men who look a certain way in society. We're telling them that if you have a 6-pack and wide shoulders, then you are enough. Not just for women, but for other men, that you're respected, right? We want that. We crave that. We need that. But at the same time, what's underneath it? I was just willing to say, hey, I don't feel good. I'm a dad. Sorry, can you hear me?
I hear it. Just switched, but it's fine. I can hear it. It sounds different.
Sorry. I hope I'm not ruining your podcast, but I knew they would die.
It's okay. How can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. So,
okay.
So I was just willing to say and acknowledge, hey, I'm struggling here. I don't feel like I look great. I don't, can you give me a heads up when there's going to be a scene where I have to look like this? Cause I don't just naturally walk around with the best 6-pack in the world. I just had a kid. I'm like working, I'm doing stuff outside of the show. Like I can't just work out all day. I'm here 14 hours a day. And that's a real thing. And then, I write about in the book that an article came out, I think it was in GQ, titled How We Ruined the Dad Bod. And I was one of the TV characters that ruined the dad bod. So here I was, suffering from an image that I'm helping perpetuate. And it was a very tricky thing. And again, it's a 1% problem. I'm a very unique person that has that issue. However, if I'm feeling it, there are other people that feel it. And I think it's important that we just, again, question everything and make room for, it doesn't matter. You should be allowed to feel how you feel as a man. If I'm not allowed to feel something, if you're telling me that I'm not allowed to feel that thing, then you're telling me that my feelings don't matter. So then you're teaching me and training me to not express my feelings, because when I do, I'm going to be shamed. That's what we teach boys at 7, 8 years old. That's what they learn in school. So in that specific area of body image, I was just like, yeah, I was suffering because I didn't feel like I was enough, even though I was. And I had nobody to talk to about it, because when I would talk about it, people would laugh at me.
So interesting. And I think that's like a common experience in the sense that if you have something that looks ideal to other people, then you almost don't have the room to have problems. But that's totally false. And again, this is a thing that as a therapist, I totally see that everybody, it doesn't matter if things look perfect, that you're so lucky enough to have this, that, or the other thing, you're still entitled to have your struggles, right? And they may be a lot bigger than other people think they are, but like I get this a lot with actors where people think that, oh, well, what do they have to worry about? They're famous and they've made it to the top or whatever else. Well, no, they're humans. They're humans. And it doesn't matter if they achieved whatever else. They still have these, insecurities, or I almost don't know. I almost have not met one person who does not have a ton of self-doubt, even the most confident person.
But that's also, so there's two things there. One is it's yes and, right? It's yes, they have made it. They are celebrities. They do have a certain type of privilege that most people don't. And that is an important thing to acknowledge in the complaining of something, right? Or in the struggle, because at the end of the day, the average person has a much harder life in a lot of ways. And so the privilege that the celebrity has is something that also should be acknowledged by the celebrity. But it's important to also make room for the celebrity to be a person, a whole human being. Otherwise, then we're treating celebrities as objects, things that don't have feelings, which is what we've done historically. And there's no room for their humanity, which is why when a celebrity kills him or herself or overdoses, we're all shocked because we're like, but they're perfect. They had everything. Why would they do that? But you never see what's happening underneath. You never see under what's, the iceberg, right? That actually took down the Titanic. You just saw a little piece of it. There's always so much more. So there has to be room for us to be humans, regardless of whether you are a celebrity or just an everyday hardworking man. Because in the same way, you can look at it, the same pressure that, a guy who works a 9 to 5 on an oil rig is struggling with the same thing. He's not allowed to feel certain things as the celebrity who's living in his castle, but feeling completely lonely and depressed, but has no one to talk to. Yeah. They're both not allowed to feel the things that they're feeling. And that's where I think humanity comes in. That's where I think seeing people for who they are, not for what they do, comes in. But also it's important for everybody to acknowledge whatever intersection of privilege they're living with. And I've learned that from my friends of color. My friends of color, I remember learning that, when I first heard a trans woman tell me that she had privilege, I was very confused. But then she told me, no, I have pretty privilege because a lot of trans women don't look like me. And I'm like, wow. So there's intersections, there's levels of privilege, there's levels of oppression. There's just things for us all to be aware of. And so long as we are aware of those things, we have to make room for us to be able to share and be our full selves. And that means sharing our humanity. That means sharing our vulnerabilities, our insecurities, right, in the book. So I had to talk about it. I had to talk about being the person that looks as good as he looks while also feeling like he doesn't. Because when you scroll down your Instagram and your social media and you see all these people that are getting likes and comments and follows because their bodies look the way that they do, my first thought is, man, they must feel trapped. I bet they're struggling because they can't post anything else. It's Pavlovian for them. They can only post shirtless pictures of themselves because that's the only thing that gives them their external validation. I wonder if that guy who's posting shirtless pictures and is working out all day long, deep down wants to post his poetry, but can't. That makes me sad.
Yeah.
For him. Who's he talking to about these things? The women that like him, do they like him for him or do they like him for how he looks? That's what I think about when I see some of these guys. Why? Because I've been that guy. I've been trapped. And we're all experiencing our own versions of that. And so long, and as soon as we recognize that, we're able to see each other.
It's so interesting. I feel like you're so perceptive and smart, and you know a lot about different things. And I know in the beginning of the book, you talked about like how, am I smart enough? That's one of the things, right? So were you like a very insightful child? Like
No.
As a kid, you were not insightful. You weren't getting from people, oh, you really are nobody. Your parents even, your sensitive dad and your supportive mom.
No, I think I was put in a box as a troublemaker and a attention seeker and someone who very much struggled with focus. So I was a bad student. I was constantly being called in for parent-teacher conferences. I barely passed Algebra 2, which I took twice. I was not a good test taker. Got a 980 on my SATs both times. The second time I just filled in C half the time, right? All of the above, or D, whatever one that was. I wasn't a good student, and mostly I think because I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel like I fit into the system. And I don't think it was until I was in my 20s that I felt comfortable to start even expressing my observations.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about student, because I know what you wrote in the book about all the trouble you had as a student, but that doesn't mean you're not smart. Like a lot of kids who don't do well in school.
I was never called. Even when you said a second ago, you're so smart, my first thought was like, nah, because I was never called smart. It was not something that, like, you don't associate Justin Baldoni and smart. That's just not something that's not been my experience in my life. Maybe part of that can be because of the way that I look. Maybe my experience has been I've often been classified as somebody who looks a certain way. If you think I didn't put this in the book, but one of the struggles I had was I put my heart into Jane the Virgin, but the weeks that would go by, and that everyone on the show got praised as actors, and I was praised for my physique. I was praised for the way that I looked. I was sexualized. I was objectified. I was praised for the tightness of my clothes and, the gifs that were being made about me. I was never praised for my performance. So even in that, I found myself struggling with like, oh, so am I just the guy that sets up all these other great actors? So I was like, am I even a good actor? I would have all these doubts and questions as I would go on in the weeks, because they'd keep getting written up, and Gina would get read up, and Yaya would and everyone was talking about everybody except me. I was the guy who talked about my looks. So I think that especially for men in society, and women, my God, women have this far worse than men do. We get put in boxes. Mm-hmm. The hot guy is very rarely smart. What's ironic is that I wasn't the hot guy until I was in my 20s. I just wasn't. Everything grew out of proportion. It just was the way that it was. I was gangly and skinny, and like I had braces, and I was a junior. I had, the big eyebrows. Like it wasn't what it seems. So I had a big personality. I would overcompensate. I was the cocky guy, but I wasn't the smart guy. And no, I don't think people. I think intelligence is generally tied to being book smart. It's tied to the quotes that you can recite. It's tied to the books that you read. It's tied to how you speak, and the words and the big words that we use. And as we try to, there's even, and especially in the intellectual community, there's a way of peacocking, even there, where you have a way of leading with certain things because you want people to know how smart. I mean, that's what the world we're living in. So I've just always been in the middle of like everything. So to answer your question is no.
Okay,
no.
So I definitely have things to say about that, because I see everything that you're saying, and it's so interesting. But I can tell you're smart, because there's in this conversation we're having.
She said I'm smart, baby. She said congratulations.
No, you can go about the rest of your day. But for real, I don't just throw that out. I don't just give that out to anybody. But what we're talking about and the things that you come back with and think about, you're very sharp. So that's intelligence. So it doesn't matter how you do or if school, that in the box thing works for you or not. It's not always a reflection. It can be, but it's not the only type of reflection on how smart you are.
I appreciate that. And I feel it my parents do feel that way about me, but the world has taught me something different. And so that's just my experience. But that's also why I wrote the book for myself, was because I was
But the fact that you can observe all these things and then take that information and do things with it, draw conclusions about things or make associations with things, like certain things that I'm not thinking of anything specific, but a few different times in our talk, I talked about something and then suddenly you were like, oh yeah, and then, so it's and, right, yes, and, but you were able to connect it to something else that somebody who's not intelligent doesn't have that ability.
I appreciate it very much.
Now you need to start reflecting on that a little bit more.
I absolutely will. I absolutely will.
Because I do see it for sure. Okay, so are we good? Did we talk about your new project? No, we didn't talk about your new projects. So I saw you have a movie in the works, right?
Yeah. We have I started a studio. So we finance and make movies and TV shows, and I have a movie I'm attached to direct, and the movies we're producing, which is exciting. But we're shooting the Man in a podcast right now, which is really exciting. So we're having conversations. These are fun, uncomfortable conversations with myself and one of my best friends, Jamie, who I write about in the book, specifically in the Privileged Enough chapter, and Liz Plank, who wrote For the Love of Men. So we have this podcast where I brought them together and we talked to some famous folks about this stuff and get uncomfortable because, not everybody will agree. And it's a pretty cool show.
So I feel like after you talk about this stuff again and again and again, you've written about it. So you spent a lot of time, I'm sure, not just writing it, but editing it and re-editing it, right? So do you feel like it's still as difficult and emotional for you when you talk about it, or does it have a little bit less gravity for you inside?
No, it's more. I mean, the more I keep having to reread my book to remember half the stuff I wrote, but also to and read other people's books, and because it's a book doesn't do it. I mean, this is the beginning.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of the journey. And so I read my book kind of like my own journal sometimes to remind myself of like, oh, okay, that's what I was feeling. That's what I was doing. And then I go back and I learn and I have these conversations, and it doesn't lose its gravity because it's a serious social issue. It's not like, oh, I'm going to move on to my next thing. I mean,
but not the issue itself, just how you feel, how difficult it is, or like the turmoil that you feel.
Yeah, it's not about, it's the biggest struggle I have with it is, am I going to do it justice? Because I'm a much better writer than a speaker off the cuff. And because I'm an automatic writer, so when I sit down to write, like it just shit comes out, and a lot of the book I was like, oh, I didn't even know I felt this way. I had some of the book is me observing in real time things about myself, about, there's I remember writing a whole chapter, a whole section on protection and what it means for men to want to be able to protect a woman. And I remember finishing this whole section and being like, oh my God, I never thought of that. So yeah, so I just want to do it justice. And that's the thing. I don't have a hard time talking about the things I write about in the book, or my insecurities or my flaws, or being vulnerable in that way, because the reason I'm doing it isn't for adulation or praise. It's to model it so that other men feel comfortable doing it. It's so funny, when my TED Talk came out, I saw so many, again, I remember the 2-minute Facebook clip was shared like so many times. It had 50 million views in 2 days. And it was just thousands of men just ripping on me. And I remember over and over again, guys were being like, he's just trying to get pussy, or whatever they would say. And I'm like, I'm married. The comedian would then say, I don't get any, but that's not true. But I'm like, I'm married, right? It's the last thing that I'm trying to do here.
Right.
This is just real. But that's what we do, is we put these people in boxes. We put men in boxes, and we judge their intentions. And I just want men to just see that, like, it doesn't make you less of a man to share this stuff. And if I share it and a man, 5 men, 1,000 men resonate with something, a chapter, an experience, then that means they feel seen, and then they're going to feel comfortable sharing that thing with another man. If we're constantly in silos and not sharing anything, then all of us think we're the only ones experiencing it.
That's the thing. I think that really is the thing, that it's such a common experience that to feel these feelings and these complexities, but have no idea. Think you're the only one because you're not allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to share about it. So I think that's it's really a worthwhile mission.
If people read it.
If what?
I said, if people read it.
People will read it. People will read it. I'm sure of it. So, I just read that you're moving to Ojai, or did I see that you're moving to Ojai? Is that your new step?
Oh, yeah,
you're in Ojai. How is that?
It's heaven. It's heaven. We live in the country in Ojai, so we don't live in the town. And it's amazing. I'm looking out over the Topa mountain ranges right now that are filled with snow because it rained last night, and it's gorgeous. It's green and surrounded by nature. It's heaven.
You're really finding yourself as you evolve and mature in your life.
At 37, I'm starting to find myself. That's
young. That's young. It is. Come on, I know you need to know that. You would know that I don't know if I want to say most, but many, many people, number one, never find themselves.
True.
And number two, if they do, it's later in life, after they've had time to reflect and explore.
I'm very grateful that I got married at 29, and I've had a family and, experienced some success at a fairly early age because, I'm grateful that it's happening now, but it doesn't, I'm finding myself, but I'm sure I'm going to refine myself at 45 and 55 and 65.
That's how it should be. You need to keep, people, I think all of us, it's good for all of us to keep evolving, to keep finding ourselves, keep understanding ourselves better. And like we said before, other people benefit from that, not just us.
Yeah, that's the goal.
That's a good thing. Okay, so I'm going to end with my favorite question.
Okay.
Which has 2 parts.
Okay.
Number 1 is, what's the image that you think people have of you?
Define people. I think there's a lot of different images of me.
Why don't you tell me what the different ones are?
I think there are some people that think it's all bullshit, that look at me and be like, oh, he's just, just profiting off of vulnerability or doing good in the world or, whatever. I think there are people that look at me and are confused of why someone who maybe looks the way that I do or has what I have is going against it so much and willing to talk about things the way that I talk about things. I think there are people that look at me and go, how the fuck does he do everything that he's doing? Excuse my language. Like, where does he have time? How's that possible? I think there are people that look at me and and say, oh, he's really sincere and pure and he makes me happy. I don't know. It depends on who the people are. And I think there's a lot of people men who look at me and think, oh, whatever they say, cuck boy, or all the, beta, all the things that they say. I think I'm something different to anybody and everybody. I don't know if this is going to be the second part of your question. What I hope people look at me as is somebody who is doing his best to live as sincerely and authentically as he can with the platform, and show the human parts of me, the human parts of life, and help people realize that none of us have it figured out, that none of us get out of this life alive, and that who we are as we are is enough. We don't have to be more than we are. And I hope that I can model that. I hope I can model what it's like to mess up and get back on your feet, and what it's like to have a marriage and kids and work your ass off and then still feel like you're not doing enough. I think I just want to model what it means to be a human and have a small platform. So
who are you really?
They're the same. So what I project, what I want people to see is who I really am, which is a guy trying to figure it out, a guy who's married, who's trying to become the best version of himself, a guy trying to show up for his kids, but feels like he always doesn't, and somebody trying to navigate the complexities of what it means to be a public person in a private world, and be true to myself. Who I really am is a Baha'i. I'm somebody who loves my faith, who loves God, who knows we're only here for a short time and really wants to be of service with the time that he has. My faith is really the Baha'i faith. We believe in the unity of all the religions. We're all different chapters. All the religions are different chapters in one book.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your faith, like how you're finding yourself now? And that's part of it, I think, right? That probably has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, look, my faith is really the Baha'i faith. We believe in the unity of all the religions. We're all different chapters. All the religions are different chapters in one book. It's something called progressive revelation, the idea that there's one God. It's not a guy in the sky with a beard. It's not a man, not a woman. It's not a person. It's an entity. The idea that we cannot fathom as finite beings the infinite. We can't fathom a world with no time and space. We can't fathom something that could create the universe. We can't even picture the universe. The universe never ends. And the Baha'i faith believes that all the religions are one at its core, that God, for the beginning of time, before recorded history, has sent down messengers and teachers to help get the world, humanity, mankind closer to unity. And that the purpose of life is to develop all of the spiritual attributes of God, all of the things that we, without knowing it every day, we're developing, the things that we're developing when we get tested, when we get frustrated, when we get angry, when we get hurt, patience, love, kindness, compassion, empathy, right? Ironically, things that women are a little bit better at than men. And the reason why we need to develop those things is because one day we're going to die of this world and be born into a new world where we don't need our bodies. And in place of our bodies, we're going to have our virtues. We're going to have the things that we spent this time developing. So it's about being of service. It's about being kind and loving and compassionate. It's about always being mindful of who you are. It's about keeping your feet on the ground and treating people the way you want to be treated, and even more so. Oftentimes treating people better than you want to be treated. It's about creating a just and equitable world, getting rid of racism and sexism and all of the isms. And then when there is something you're not in alignment with, or when you disagree with someone, or when someone has a different lifestyle choice than yours, it's being overly kind to them, and also making sure that they are loved and that you never gossip or backbite about them. Because the worst thing you could ever do in the Baha'i faith is talk poorly about another human being. Because the cause, the reason is unity. That's why it exists. And for us to ever achieve unity in our lives, ever achieve unity in the world, it has to start in our own homes. It cannot spread unless it starts here in the mirror in our own homes. So that's the faith. That's what I believe in. And yeah.
Well, that's all good. I didn't ask you about fame. Like, what is it like for you generally? Being famous, being recognized, people see you probably and they'll know you right away. How is that experience?
It's the opposite of the experience I had growing up, because people would talk about you. People would talk about me growing up, but they talk about me in a negative way. Oh, he's this or he's that, or that's that kid or that. So, growing up and having fame is interesting. I want to make sure the way I look at it is this. If I can make somebody's day with a minute of my day, if I can make somebody's month or a year by taking a minute of my day, then that's something that I'm going to always try to do. So I don't have there's different levels of fame. I don't have the type of fame where like people chase me down the street anywhere I go. I'm not Shawn Mendes or Harry Styles or George Clooney. But the people that follow me or that care about me, I mean something to them. And so I value that and I appreciate that. And so I always will try to make time for them. There might be a point in my life or someone else's life where that becomes unmanageable and you have to take time for yourself. But I look at fame as a gift in that it has given me so much. And the only way I can ever feel good about having it is if I give more. So I try to give more than I take. So I'm always giving. I'm giving it away. It's what we're told in the Baha'i faith we should do. We should give ourselves away. And I try to use my fame to create other fame, to highlight things that are important to me, to make somebody feel better, to make somebody feel seen. And also the thing about fame is that I know it's temporary, so I don't get attached to it. And that's the other very, very important thing is one day the fame will disappear. Jane the Virgin will be a memory in someone's mind. And if I don't take another acting job, I'll just be a person behind the scenes that was once that guy, and that goes away. So, Baha'u'llah in the Baha'i Faith says that wealth is followed by poverty and poverty is followed by wealth. And I have no qualms about the understanding that this is a temporary thing. Now I have to trick myself into making sure that I don't try to chase it or to keep it. That's the key. And that's where that creates anxiety. And that's what creates that, you get stuck in that loop. So long as you have fame and you're comfortable with it going away, then I think you'll be fine. But if you try to keep it, if you try to hold on to it, you suffocate it.
Right. Okay. So that's more of you reflecting, observing, thinking about things, philosophies, analyzing them in your head, and doing something with them.
Trying.
Intelligence. Sorry, I had to say it.
I'll take it. I honor that. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. Good luck with your book.
Thank you, Kara. See you later.
That was Justin Baldoni. Pick up his book, Man Enough, watch his movies, watch Jane the Virgin, watch Justin and Me on YouTube. Talk to me about the show. Start therapy today with BetterHelp. Links to everything are in today's show notes. I'm Kara. This is Really Famous. Have a great day or night, and I will talk to you soon.